Yo, what's popping? Today I'm going to be previewing the Western Teams Countdown Cups. My Eastern version is actually the best performing video today, so thank you so much for watching it. And later today, I will be doing a stream where I watch the Korean Contenders VODs from earlier this morning where they played on the patch that Owl will be playing the Countdown Cup on. There is some Sombra stuff, some Winston stuff. Junker Queen looks to be dead. I haven't looked at it very much at all, but I will be doing that later tonight, so pop in on this channel if you're interested in that. Anyway, going on to the Piracy Turtles. So the Piracy Turtle, as I mentioned in my video about the bottom of NA, they need to win every match and have Boston lose every match to make play-in. So it's just not, realistically, it's not happening. They've not shown anything near the capability of being able to do that. They are not beating the Dallas Fuel. They are not beating the Houston Outlaws or the San Francisco Shock. It's just not happening. I would be very surprised if they managed to even get a win unless the Vancouver Titans go back to sucking, but I kind of feel like they shouldn't be that bad as they were earlier this season. But so yeah, their schedule is the Spitfire, Fuel, Outlaws, Titans, Shock, and Uprising, which, it's not a bad schedule. I guess you play the two best teams and a pretty good the Houston Outlaws, who are 13-5 in the regular season. They have the third best record in the regular season, actually. You wouldn't think it, but it's the Houston Outlaws there. So yeah, as I said, they can maybe squeak out a win against the Titans, but I just don't think it's even possible. Look, they got 3-0'd by them last stage. They managed to map against New York, so good for them for that one. But I like to talk about like the bright spots on a roster, but honestly, I guess the backline of Luke Mino and Rack Attack are, I would consider, a bright spot, but they're still been probably below average. It's hard to rate them above average with how bad their team has been. I think on the right roster and maybe next season, Luke Mino and Rack Attack could have some pretty good showings. But just on this roster this season, it's not going to happen. And they're just going to have to be at least considered subpar for the time being. Because how do they make themselves look like they're at least average with this roster? It's hard to say. I guess Cry could have some potential. I'm not willing to write him off based off of a Joker Queen meta. We'll see how he does this stage, but I'm not expecting really anything from anyone on the Paris Eternal. Especially this DPS line. I just don't think this DPS line, pound for pound, is matching up to any other roster in this league. And that's just the thing about it. I mean, like, Wub has a very interesting hero pool. You can see maybe if he gets a chance to be super flexible, then he could shine there. But I just don't think Dove or Malthel are going to match up pound for pound with anyone. And even I don't think Wub will either. He's just going to have to make a nice little niche for himself with his flexibility, basically. So not looking too great for Paris, but no one thought it would. This is the last stage. They're going to be the Paris Eternal. They will be the Vegas Eternal next season. So last stage for Paris. Going to the New York Excelsior. They need 3 more wins than Boston at least. And then it goes to map diff because neither of them have played in a tournament. But it's not looking great. I mean, New York could technically do it because they played that Defiant, Rain, Justice, Gladiators, Spitfire, and Uprising. So maybe if they beat the Uprising, they could squeak out 2 wins against maybe a poorly performing regular season Atlanta Rain or a Washington Justice, who are just in Justice mode. So it's like maybe it's like technically possible that New York can make it, but it just doesn't seem like it. Especially after last stage, it looked like they were giving us hope by beating the Outlaws 3-2 and then having some life against Fuel 3-1, but then it was just a nosedive into subpar gameplay the entire time, and they just never really got it together. They just didn't improve over the entire stage. It was very weird. And like we've been saying it all season that this roster, they have the potential, the pieces are there, but like at what point can we just stop with that? Because Anson J on ping is actually an upgrade over no main support, but it's not like Anson J on ping is going crazy. He's a solid upgrade, but he's still not, I would say, still below average. The biggest bright spots on this team is always going to be Aki and Flora because they have the capability to just grab matches by the balls and just kind of win some maps. But like as we see on this like last stage, they did not really do that enough to even give them a chance for a tournament. And I just don't think it's a strategy you can rely on. That's all they've been relying on is Yaki and Flora for far too long, and there's just not been enough results to back that up. We'll see if Kellen's okay, because I think it should go back to Monkey from what I've seen from the Korean Contenders VOD. Or not just Monkey, but it's not just Junker Queen. I don't know. I'm quite worried about New York still. I just don't think they've improved like almost this entire season, and I don't think it's going to start now. So I could see them maybe finding a win against one of these teams, but it would be unlucky. It would be a fluke, like undoubtedly, if they get one of these wins. I don't know if you guys heard that siren or not. My bad. Maybe I'd say their best chances against an off day Washington Justice, which an off day for Washington is kind of like a normal day, I guess sometimes. But going to the Vancouver Titans, who you know what they had a pretty good showing. They get all three of their wins last stage. They go to the tournament in Toronto. They don't really do much, but they go there at least. So next stage, they play the Spitfire, the Gladiators, the Fuel, Defiant, Mayhem, and Eternal. So there's at least one win over the Eternal, I would expect. And then maybe they can find some other ones. Maybe they get some revenge on Florida after they 3-0'd them. You have to give the edge to Florida a little bit, though. Although, to be fair, um, no, I guess I'll talk about that when it comes to Florida. But I was thinking, will Florida normally get their stuff together at the end of stage? Oh, that is the end of a stage, actually. No, it's not looking great for the Vancouver Titans. Especially with the Sojourn nerf that there is, which makes Ash probably a bit better in the matchup. So you have to wonder, well, does that mean Aspire is going to be on the Ash? And can he carry the team as much as the Ash? Because Aspire really is this team first and foremost. Then you have to question, well, who's on the Sombra if Sombra is meta? It's looking like, I don't know. You bring a Mirror for Sombra, then you have False playing the tank again, or like, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what this team does. I have hope for them, but I don't have a 3-3 stage hope for them. Like, realistically, I guess they could beat the Defiant because they were close last time. But you're not beating the Fuel, you're not beating the Gladiators. And I don't know, I don't think they would beat the Mayhem or the Spitfire. So I'm thinking it could go back to 1-5. But if they find at least one match in there, I guess that'd be okay. But realistically, for the Titans, it's very hard to argue that they would make a play-in spot because in the previous video, I said they need 2 more wins, or they need to find 3 more wins in the Uprising to actually get in. And it's like, who are you getting 3 wins from? Even if Boston do go 0-6, who are you getting the wins off of? It's like Paris, Mayhem, and like Spitfire, maybe. Like if it's, I don't know, it'll be rough. I don't think it's impossible, but unfortunately, because they lost to Boston at the end of the last stage, it basically killed their chances. They needed to get that win, and they didn't, and they lost. So we'll see. But more about this roster, right? It's just Aspire going crazy. Masa, I think, has been fine. I'm not sold on either Aztec or Sky Reaper. Aztec had some good showings on the Zen in the midseason madness, so I guess there's hope there. But in the tank department, can Mira really play anything that's not Doomfist or Junker Queen, and is False able to step in? 2 big questions, and there's always King. Is King good enough? So, I don't know. Vancouver's going to ride or die on Aspire, and if he's not on the Sojourn, they're kind of in trouble. We're looking at Boston now, the team who should secure the last spot in the play-ins, in my opinion. They end up playing the Houston Outlaws, the Florida Mayhem, Washington Justice, LA Gladiators, New York Excelsior, and the Piracy Turtles. So it's not really about how many wins you get, it's how many wins you get that Vancouver don't. If you get 1 win, that forces Vancouver to get 4 wins. So you look at it like that, you beat Paris, and suddenly Vancouver, no matter how poorly you do, it's an uphill battle for them already. I think Boston have some good stuff going forward, though, because they're back to the 3-3-3 like they had at the beginning of the season, where they have 3 in every role, which is funny. But I don't know. I think after firing Laurie, this team looked really good in their reverse sweep against the Vancouver Titans at the end of that stage. You know, they brought in Mag. It wasn't really working out. Mag still has some good potential there. I'd say it'd be much better to play Mag rather than the Punky. We'll see if Itzel gets any gameplay. Maybe only on the ball. I would expect him to get that. But hopefully it is Punk leading the charge because they've had their best success as a franchise. Not as a franchise, but with Punk in the lineup since they've had Punk. And then, of course, Seeker came in. He made a big explosion. Really very interesting how far he goes with that, if that was just a one-time thing, or if he's going to consistently be able to diff players at the same caliber as Aspire, who is widely regarded as one of the best Sojourns in NA, right? So it'll be very interesting to see if he can keep it up. And I don't know, that's the biggest thing, because I don't think there's a problem with this backline. I'd like to see Crimzo get more gameplay. I think he's probably the best player on the Uprising. I would say Crimzo has a good shot at that. He's just, whenever he's on the Zen and he's able to play it, he's so dynamic with how he just controls his team's success in a way. Like, he does so much work from the back line. But there are some weaknesses because they could get a little too flashy. We saw before how they were. Well, that was Laurie as a new head coach. There's some hope there, where they were used to flip around their tanks a bit too much. But I'd really like to see them stick with a tank, or just like once every now and then. Like you bring in Punk for like Sigma stuff for sure, but I'd like to see them stick with either Punk or Mag for the Doomfist and not flip flop between them, and just kind of make sure you solidify our roster heading into the play-ins that that you're confident in, because the play-ins is going to be on this path also. So you have to be confident in your team moving forward. But I don't see a lot of question marks for the uprising. It's just, I guess Seeker's a little unproven, and there's always the tank roulette going on. But we'll see how they do with the new head coach. It should be interesting. I see maybe I could foresee Boston getting 1-2 because they play New York too. So there's 2 wins right there. That should be pretty free. And then I could see them beating Washington. I could see them beating Florida too. I could realistically see a 4-2 stage for Boston if the Gladiators don't bounce back 5. Like I don't know. I'm pretty high on Boston. Not high, but I'm pretty optimistic about how they could perform. But going to Washington, we see the 5-man roster. The good old they can't make any roster errors, and it's the Washington Justice. So we'll see how they do when they have to put Decay on the hit scan basically. So they end up playing the Dallas Fuel, the San Francisco Shock, the Excelsior, Reign, Uprising, and Gladiators. So those are 3 damn good opponents that they're playing, the top 3 in the league right now. They are technically not in the play-ins yet, but they're pretty much, if they get a single win, they are. Hopefully they get one. I would expect them to win against the Excelsior, and if they're on, they could definitely upset the Reign. They could upset the Uprising. But if they're off, it could be a 6 stage, really, because that's one weekend that is a write-off, basically, and then the other side you have the Gladiators. So I don't know. It's a pretty tough schedule for the Justice. The biggest thing about this team is, you always have Decay being able to carry when he can. Assassin has looked good when his team when his team is playing well, he's looked good, but when his team doesn't show up, he really doesn't show up. As we saw whenever they played against the Houston Outlaws at the end of that stage, whenever they came up against Toronto in the latter half of that series. We'll see how they do there. And there's always the question with the Justice of, will you go too aggressive like last stage? They were way over aggressive and didn't know how to slow down. But there's other times where it feels like they're just way too passive and they just play fully back. And they need to find a nice middle ground. And I'm not sure if I believe in this team to be able to do that. We'll see. Assassin on the Sombra is not something you like to hear after last season. But who knows? I'm not too high on the Justice. My Justice hype has died down. I was trying to ride it out as much as I could last stage and all in the season before that, but I just cannot bring myself to actually find hype for this team anymore. I'm sorry. It's just always they just always fall short in some way. And just like, I think the thing about the Justice is they don't really adapt to what's going on. They just have one mode, they do it, and it works against some teams that don't know how to beat it, and then against teams that do know how to beat it, it just falls flat completely. And that's kind of been their story, their entire career, their entire franchise in a way, or at least since the Decay era. I don't know. I see maybe 2 wins at best. 3 wins at best, I guess, if Atlanta falls short. Well, we'll see. Now the Florida Mayhem, who are a very interesting team, where they actually make 4th in the Summer Showdown tournament. So I guess that's kind of riding a high right now. Playing the Gladiators, Uprising, Titans, Reign, Defiant, and Outlaws, which is a pretty mid schedule, right? I mean, you play the Gladiators, who are the top team, and then Defiant and Outlaws are quite good, but they're not really unbeatable. We've seen Florida be able to beat these teams before. I think that's a decent schedule. I mean, I guess Atlanta too. But Boston's very winnable. Titans are very winnable. It's not awful, and they're not really in a position to lose, right? Because they're not going to make it into the top 6. I would guess. I guess this is the kind of the range of teams where they could, but I would wager that probably Atlanta get the edge. If Florida are able to beat Atlanta, then that would give them a huge advantage, and maybe they could crack the top 6 then. But they still have to leapfrog over to Defiant. I don't know. If they beat the Defiant, then they're in good hands. If they beat Atlanta, Defiant, Boston, Vancouver 4-2, shoot them up to 16 points, that's in a pretty good spot to dodge the play-in. So it's possible. We'll see. The weakness for this team, I don't know what their weakness is, to be honest with you. This is it's a bit of a weird team because it always felt like there's just something wrong. There's not something right with this team. Like last stage, it was like they're just not. It's just not there. You're playing the Sermajed. You didn't know if you wanted to play Animo on the Lucio. You take him off. Sermajed goes in. You play the double flex support. It kind of works. It kind of doesn't. There's always a question of Xe or Hydron. Which one are you going to play? I don't think it matters too much to the team's success. I'd say Xe probably has a higher like mechanical high, but Hydron is more consistent in how good he's able to find those opening picks. So we'll see. Checkmate has to be sturdy. Has to make sure that he's not, a little inconsistent, has to play up to his level, and someone has to tone down that aggression but keep it up enough that he doesn't overextend, but he is able to at least apply a lot of pressure, which we've seen him do. But this team should be pretty flexible. It should be pretty solid. I guess the backline's kind of a big question because Animo's not very good. I would say Rupel and Sermajed. Sermajed can be a liability, but he can also make some great plays that propel your team to higher highs than you would expect. And then Rupel's just kind of there. He's solid. He's getting the job done. I don't know. This team, I don't think they're like bad. There's no like super glaring weaknesses. It's just how high can they actually reach. Kind of a nice middle of the pack team, I think, right now. I don't know. Florida's a weird team. It's always been a weird team this entire season. We'll see how they work with this meta, what direction they choose to go in. But I couldn't tell you. They're a weird team. Gumbo's got something cooking in the back of his mind. Then we have the Atlanta Reign. So the Atlanta Reign, nice 12 points with a 9-9 record. Some good tournament placings, but not good enough to actually nab any extra points. So they end up playing the Defiant, the Excelsior, the Shock, the Justice, the Mayhem, and the Fuel. So that's not a great schedule, but it's you play Shock and Fuel. So that's a bit questionable. Probably some losses there, but we've seen them been able to make those upsets before. And then, Excelsior should be a win. Mayhem should be a win, but we've seen the Mayhem do some things, and we've seen the regular season Atlanta Reign not be too hot. And they need to have a bounce back stage after a really poor performance. The biggest thing with Atlanta is making sure they integrate Speedily well, because Speedily has some very high highs. We've seen in contenders that he was like supposed to be the next one up. He was supposed to be in a Rookie of the Year conversation, even though he came in late, but he just hasn't done that in that last stage. So this time they need to really integrate him well, make sure they set him up for success. And then Kai and Speedily looks to be a very scary duo. Then, of course, you have Hawk, who's been very flexible, probably the most flexible tank in NA, right? I don't know if you could say... No one else is more flexible than Hawk. I would say they're even putting him on Winston, putting him on the Rhine. Their Gator has been put to the wayside. But then you also have OG, UV, and Vigilante. So what are they doing with that new addition to their backline? Is Vigilante going to get the nod to go in over UV? I kind of doubt with the synergy that UV's already built up and how good he's performed. But this does open up double flex support a lot better because OG, while he has a decent BAP, you want UV on the BAP, all things considered, right? So it'll be interesting to see what Atlanta do with all these tools that they have at their disposal. But they just have to find that consistency in the regular season because, like, as good of a team as they are, and they've been consistently a top NA team in tournaments when they make it. But we saw they go 2-4, they have a poor stage, they don't make the tournament. Suddenly, you're like, well, how good are the Atlanta Reign actually? But I don't know. Should be a good team on paper, but they just have not been able to get better than the 500 record. I see them beating... They should beat everyone that's not the Shock or the Fuel, maybe not the Defiant. We'll see how they do at the very off-rip. But... They could have a good run, They have the tools. They always have. And then you have Venom on the Tracer. He could come in now, too. And then suddenly you have Kai, Venom, Speedily on the right rotation. I don't know if Nero gets any gameplay. It'd be interesting to see that. But, Atlanta Reign. Got the hat on, I guess. But not too much to say about them, honestly. They're a pretty interesting squad. Interesting in a weird way. But anyway, the Toronto Defiant, holding on to that number 6. That's actually I should have touched on for the Atlanta Reign before I go to Defiant real quick. Is that first match is going to be quite impactful to see who is able to nab that last spot because if they beat the Defiant, suddenly they're probably on top, and the Defiant need to reach into that top 6 spot. So that's a very key matchup to watch out for, which I'm also going to talk about here, I guess. So the Toronto Defiant franchise peaking with the 3rd place in the Summer Showdown. How are they going to follow it up? Is the big question. Can they keep up this success? We'll see, because they end up playing the Atlanta Reign, the New York Excelsior, the Shock, Titans, Mayhem, and Outlaws. So that's actually not a bad schedule. Your only guaranteed loss is the Shock, pretty much. Other than that, everyone else is very beatable. And that most impactful one probably being the Reign, because they're the only team that's you're really fighting for, that you're playing against for that last spot. Because Houston are probably going to get, I think, maybe one win, and they're able to get secure a top 4 spot, so, or a top 6 spot rather. So that middle of the pack race for numbers 5 and 6, it comes down to Spitfire, Defiant, Reign, and Mayhem, right? And Toronto really only have their only core thing they can actually grab a hold of is the Atlanta Reign, and drag them down to keep them below them. So we'll see that. So that's a very important matchup still. I'm gonna reiterate, but Toronto, if there is a somber Winston kind of meta, that should bode quite well for them, because we know Hisu, very talented at the somber. We know this. It's like literally his favorite hero, and he's so good at it. One of the best in NA, I would argue. Then you have Muse being on the Winston, right in his wheelhouse. We saw at the beginning of this season that Muse should probably be able to pop off. And then Charong and Twilight, no matter what support line you play, they're going to be able to fulfill it wonderfully. Charong, we saw he was pretty damn good on the flex support, as good as you could expect any main support to be. Twilight can play the Brigitte. What else do you really need from this team? They need to keep up that success that they found. It'll be interesting to see if they can actually keep it with Muse coming in, if he is going to be the tank moving forward, which there's a pretty decent chance he is, I would suspect. And then the question mark between Finale and Aldo, who actually gets the go-ahead there, depending on what you're playing in the next meta. Finale, I think, would only really play with the Tracer, and although I would say probably everything else, but we'll see. That was always the question mark with, I don't know, just beating the mid allocations. Because right now, 6 isn't bad, but 6 out of 13 is quite mid. So they are going to have to try and climb out of there if they want. I see probably, I don't know, it could be 5-1 on a really good stage, but you could also lose to Houston, you can lose to the Reign. I could see them losing to the Mayhem, and they took the Vancouver Titans to 5, so you can fluctuate anywhere from a 1-5 to a 5-1. I hope they do a bit better than that, but it's the Toronto Defiant. It's not impossible to absolutely tank a stage. I don't know. They haven't really succeeded with Muse being their main coach or their main tank for a while. But it's possible, especially if you get Hisu on that Sombra and they're able to utilize. However, you also have to think, if Hisu's on the Sombra, is the team good enough to rally around him? Because he's not going to be able to do as much work as he was, realistically. So, because Sombra, at least historically, is not the main carry champ or hero. I don't know why I said champ. That's quite unlucky. So if Hisu was on the Sombra, is Finale or Aldo going to be able to step up, or Muse or Hoppa, to really carry that team? Because the work Hisu was doing to get them to the 3rd place on the Ash was unrealistic. He was probably carrying the team not as much as like Proper was carrying or Hanbin was carrying, but right below that, I don't know if there was a harder carry in NA than Hisu last stage, which I'm just talking off the top of my head. That might not be true, but he's not going to be able to play at that same level. And will Toronto be able to overcome that deficit? Maybe, maybe not. The London Spitfire. So London also fighting for that last spot, for those last 2 spots, with the best of them right now securing it. They end up playing the Eternal, the Titans, the Gladiators, Fuel, Excelsior, and Shock. So wow, that is a good schedule. That is the 3 bottom teams, which is always nice to see. And then you play Gladiator, Shock, and Fuel. So actually, that's probably a 3-3. Maybe that isn't a nice schedule. I don't want to talk too soon. I saw the bottom 3, and I was like, ooh, let's go. And then I saw the top 3, and I'm like, oh my god. That is a rough, drastic shift. It's going to be hard to judge how good they are, because they're either going to get kind of rolled on, or they're going to stomp the bottom teams. So it looks like an easy 3-3 for London to put them at 16 points. And they don't play anyone near them, so they're going to be kind of off in their own little isolated world, and just kind of hope that they can't take points from either the Defiant, Reign, or Mayhem. Quite interesting. The thing about London is, well, we saw them overcome no Reinhardt last stage. Now, they still didn't actually perform that well in the tournament. They still go out early, but we saw them overcome it. Overall, they look pretty solid. And Hadi was able to step up and play it. So next stage is to Reinhardt back. With Junker Quinn gone, is Reinhardt right back in business, or are they going to have to shift away from that once again? If they do overcome it, I feel like Junker Queen is kind of similar to Ryan in a lot of ways, where it was like a hottie character, you can kind of run at them and stuff. But on the ball, which they were playing a lot of in the midseason madness, they didn't look bad, but they didn't look like they were going to be able to compete in like the top 5 region. He wasn't looking that strong on it, and they were still getting heavily carried by Sparker. Which makes the other question: if there is a somber meta, if there's a lot of somber gameplay, is it going to be Sparker on it, or what's happening with Sparker? Because he has been basically, I think, the largest carry on this roster. So suddenly, it's kind of similar to, well, if Sparker's not carrying, like whenever Hisu's not carrying, who is going to step up to the plate? Is there Shax as a backbone? We'll see. But definitely the biggest question is still, like, what composition are they actually going to pull out? Are they going to just stick with the Reinhardt? Possibly. If they do stick with the Reinhardt and it works, they're going to be scary, because probably no other team is going to do that. They've shown no other team has the guts to stick with the Reinhardt for a whole stage or a whole 2 stages compared to the London Spitfire, because they believe in what they can do. So I would suspect back to the Reinhardt, we won't know how good it actually is, because they don't really play anyone like mid-table around them. They're just playing that upper echelon of teams. But, the Gladiators are winnable if they don't bounce back well. The Fuel are winnable. We saw them have a weak stage. They could bring back and have another weak stage. Who knows? But London's going to be a very interesting team to watch, I think. Because you're going to have to really watch the games to figure out how good they are, and not just rely on the results. Next, we have the Houston Outlaws. They, pretty much secured a playoff spot, dodging the play-ins if they get a single win, and it looks like they should, because they play the Uprising, Shock, Eternal, Fuel, Mayhem, and Defiant. So you beat the Paris Eternal, check that box off. You're pretty much in the playoffs, so it should be good for them there. Looking at the rest of them, I think that the Shock or the Fuel are probably a little too far out of reach, but it is going to be a LAN against Fuel. They're going to have a Texas crowd, so that'll be fun to watch, I guess, is worth mentioning. But like, kind of an average schedule. Defiant should hopefully give them a run for their money, but Houston have historically had that advantage. Or I think it's 2-2 in the series right now, because Defiant beat them stage 1, then Houston kills them 2 tournaments, and then Defiant kills them a tournament. So this is going to be a tiebreaker match to see who actually takes the regular season record against each other. So that'll be interesting to watch at the end. But I don't know. The biggest question mark with Houston is, well, are they going back to the Doomfist now? Because the Junker Queen's gone, so you're going right back to Doom? Or is the no slow on Doomfist enough to actually kill him outright? And if it is enough to kill him outright, you're just running Doge, or is Dante going over to the tank position still? So I would kind of wonder if Dante is just going to stick to tank full time, because if he isn't on tank, he's not getting any playtime. Pelican and Merit are just better than him, I would say. I mean, like, you could say, oh, maybe the Tracer, because he played a little bit of Tracer in the midseason madness, but like, it should just be Pelican Merit. And then the next question is, well, like, on Sigma match, you go to Circuit Royale, are you putting Dante on Sigma? Because Doge isn't like a Sigma player, so what's going on there? And then, of course, there's another question of, you have creative now. You have creative Laster Lep, no more Iris. What is going on there? Are you going to run with Laster Lep? Are you bringing creative? Are you going to run a mix? So there are a lot of question marks for the Houston Outlaws, depending on their meta. But there's also a lot of consistencies. Pelican and Merit are going to go crazy, and that's the biggest consistency. It's Pelican and Merit are going to go crazy. I don't know. I kind of am a little worried, especially in that tank slot. But I don't know, should have at least... They should be in a good position to get a few wins, at least over Paris. Probably snag one at least over Boston Mayhem, and Defiant's always going to be up in the air. So, interesting to see what happens on the Houston Outlaws. Another good, important team to watch for that's in the higher echelon. Now the LA Gladiators, looking to make a critical bounce back stage after just winning 2 matches. They end up playing Mayhem, Titans, Spitfire, Excelsior, Justice, and Uprising, which looks to me, eyeballing it, to be the easiest schedule I've seen so far. Their best team they're playing is the Spitfire, and then after that it's like the Mayhem. Like, that should be a 6-0 stage, shouldn't it? Maybe you lose to the Spitfire. Maybe the Justice find an upset, but probably not. They haven't really found that. I highly doubt that. So it should just be a pretty clean 6-0 stage, I would expect. It'll be interesting to see if you give Reiner a space to go ahead, but I kind of think they'll go right back to Reiner, assuming the Queen is dead, and Space will just be stuck in Sigma jail all over again. You'll need Shu to come back into the lineup, and he seemed to be a pretty key component for their winning. And then I guess one of the things you could look at is Happy going to reach a next level that he should have reached whenever he surrounds himself with these new players, with a better team, so players should get better. But we didn't actually see that with Happy last stage, so that's the biggest thing to watch out for. But honestly, I expect a quick bounce back, 6-0, 5-1 stage, something around that area, and they call it a night because why not? I guess you could say, oh, maybe they'll take the stage off because like they don't need these points, but I think that's kind of risky to do. I think you need to take all the time you can get and get that game experience. So I don't know. Should be pretty clean cut for the Gladiators. I don't see too much error. And then the Dallas Fuel. After a big tournament win, how are they going to follow that up? They end up playing the Justice, the Eternal, Titans, Spitfire, Outlaws, and Rain, which is a pretty easy schedule again. There's no shock there. There's no Gladiators. So that's not too bad. They dealt with those guys in the last stage. It should be probably a nice 6-0 stage you could expect, but then you also have to come back and to think about well, they struggled in the midseason madness. If we get a meta similar to that one, are they going to struggle again? Are they going to bring Gurio out of his grave? Like what's going on with Gurio? Hopefully he stays there, stays put where he is. Let Edison take the reins fully, as they did and had success. No question mark with Chio Fielder. Big question mark in the tech department. Does Fearless come back in, or is Hanbin, who has been absolutely dominant whenever he's gotten a chance to play in the kickoff clash and the summer showdown, do you let him just take the reins and see what he can do on some different tanks? I suspect they'll probably lean back over to Fearless and let Doha play the Sombra, because Doha should probably do it. So, I mean, Sparkle's benched maybe. I don't know. I would expect Dallas to kind of take that success and run with it, but I could definitely see them kind of faltering to maybe a Rain makes a comeback here. At the Outlaws, if they figure out the points that I talked about earlier. But the other four teams, I would expect a pretty good win from. Spitfire could run for their money, but again, what are the Spitfire going to do? So, I don't know. The Dallas Fuel, if they figure out the Dallas Fuel, they're always one thing. They figure out what they want to run and they run it to perfection. If they choose the wrong thing, they will lose off of it. So they just got to make sure they pick what they want to run quickly, like they failed to do in the midseason madness. They were kind of fumbling it. You gotta make sure they commit to the comp that they want to be good at. They make sure it's the good comp. Give her Diesel, and they should be all good. I would hope, but who knows? And now, finally, the San Francisco Shock, the kingpin of NA, just one regular season loss and a pretty decent schedule. They played the Justice, the Outlaws, the Defiant, the Rain, the Eternal, and the Spitfire. So, again, no big dogs, no Gladiators, no Fuel. Those were in the last stage. But, the Outlaws are no joke. You have to watch it a little bit, but realistically, they haven't lost to any other team other than the Fuel in the regular season. This should be another 6-0 stage for them. There are some questions again. Proper Kilo Sam. If there's a Sombra player, who is it? You probably don't want Proper on the Sombra, because if he's similar, again, to Hisu and Sparker, if he's not able to carry, who is? I don't know how much Kilo played Sombra. Not sure. I don't know how much Sam plays the Sombra either. I'd expect he plays it. But who knows? Violet Finn, the question marks regarding them have probably disappeared largely. And then you have Kaluja or Mikey. Hopefully Mikey doesn't play very much, because I think Kaluja is just better in almost every aspect except in the ball specialty maps. That's the only time I hope to see Mikey play. But we saw in the midseason madness, they would bring him in for places where you just don't want him in. You would bring out the Mikey Monkey. Why? For what reason? Just commit to Kaluj. He's the better player. He'll be better in the long run. Especially if you need to have a flexible tank. So, I don't know. It's a San Francisco Shock. I guess there are some question marks there, though. If Proper's on the Sombra. I don't know who it is. But who knows? Not me. Only Krusty knows. But, the San Francisco Shock. They'll be fine in this season. So, anyway, like this video if you like it, subscribe for more daily Overwatch League content. Again, I'm going to be streaming later today with the Korean Contenders VODs. So check that out. And yeah, have yourself a good one. Deuces.